common. We invited Rick Waters to come and give a brief presentation. He actually is the executive director with the Denver Indian Center, which is, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the city. It's over on Morrison and Tennyson or something.
Morrison Road, Utica Road.
Utica, okay. So this is Rick Waters, and I'll let you introduce yourself. Thank you very much for coming too.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you for inviting us today, and I'll say us because I'm just representing the Denver Indian Center and to a degree the Indian community here today. Again, my name is Rick Waters. I am Kiowa and Cherokee, and those of you that have read your history books or watched TV and the movies, often you hear the 5 civilized tribes: the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Seminole, the ones that were involved with the Trail of Tears coming by. President Jackson felt, okay, well, we like this land better, so we're going to move you to Oklahoma. So there was a movement called the Trail of Tears, but that group was generally called the 5 civilized tribes because they were involved and closely associated with this population that was growing in the southeast United States. In fact, the Cherokee at one time were classified as the most educated or literate people in the world, because they had developed a syllabary, and within 6 months, all people could read and write with the language that they had developed. Well, not the language, but the written component of the language that was developed. So that's the 5 civilized tribes. Now, the other half is Kiowa, and I'll touch on a little bit later as well. The Kiowa tribe, we argue with the Comanches about having knocked over the most wagon trains coming across Oklahoma and Texas as the westward movement. But the Kiowa also were inhabitants and ancestral tribe here in Colorado. You might see some signs and even a county or city named Kiowa here. But I say that only because I tell people half Kiowa, half Cherokee, so I'm half wild and half civilized, which day it is. But I am currently executive director at the Denver Indian Center, and I'm going to share a little bit of information about American Indian Native Americans here in the state of Colorado, just to kind of give you some background, and then I'll talk briefly about the Denver Indian Center and what we do in terms of our role in serving the American Indian community and partnering with agencies like Denver Water. So I'm thankful that you are recognizing our community on this particular day. And I understand you're having fry bread at lunch. I don't know. Hopefully I can stay around, or maybe I'll come back and get some. Denver is often described as crossroads of Indian country. And I say that because historically there's been numerous tribes that have come across. Now, the most recognized and actually have reservations here in Colorado are the Ute, Southern Ute, Ute Mountain Ute, and there's a Northern Ute, but Southern Ute and the Ute Mountain Ute do have their reservations down in southwestern Colorado near Durango. Most commonly, you'll hear the tribes of Cheyenne, Arapaho, Kiowa, Ute, Navajo, Shoshone, and several others that kind of consider this area of Colorado as their ancestral homeland. They either traveled through or they actually inhabited the area. But the Plains tribes, for the most part, were kind of transitional, mobile. Some people call them nomadic, but actually we're just kind of moving around because this was our land and territory. Currently, there are in the Front Range area corridor, there are approximately 200 federally recognized tribes. Now, this is compared to approximately 567 plus federally recognized tribes in the United States. And just a little tidbit of information. That's federally recognized tribes. Now, there are state recognized tribes and even corporate recognized tribes, which expand that number. But of that 567 with the federal government, that's the one that they recognize and have that relationship, the legal, political relationship with. Of that 500 plus, literally half are in Alaska, and about a third are in California. The rest are spread out. But most people recognize this as Indian country, really, around Colorado, North and South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona. So we're kind of the reason, Denver has been often indicated as a crossroads of Indian country. According to the 2010 census, there's approximately 60,000 American Indians who are descendants, and I'll add that to it, in the Denver Front Range area. 77% of all American Indians are living in urban areas, cities, as opposed to 1950 when there was probably about 6%, most who live in the rural reservation settings. And I mentioned there's 2 reservations here in Denver. Now this week, Denver will host, just kind of an information piece, one of the larger gatherings in the nation of Indian people. It's called the March Powwow. Some of you may have seen it on TV or publications out there. So that'll start Friday through Sunday, and it's a social gathering in terms of a powwow. And numbers of Indian people and tribal representation will be there. So very nice event if you want to go, if you're interested. I think they do charge a admission fee, but it's a good opportunity to actually see different tribal dancing and customs. But again, it's kind of more of the Plains Indians, because that's what the powwow and that type of dancing is. You have tribes from the northeast and the southeast that do other type of dancing and celebration and social gatherings. But this is one that I think impacts the Denver economy. It's going to bring in some influx of money, but it brings about awareness, and that's why I want to commend you on what you're doing here in terms of recognizing Indigenous peoples. That it does bring awareness, because we are, in most populations, when you do a survey or a count, Indian people are generally about 1% of the population. And it kind of stayed that much, pretty much status quo. I give you that background, and I'm going to give you some opportunity for a question and answer here in a minute, but I give you that background because we're talking, we're here in Denver, and we're talking about Indian people and the population, and we could spend all day talking about the reservation settings and all the things, that the boarding schools and all the issues that have impacted Indian people and where we are today and kind of made us who we are today. But in 1956, the government was involved in basically a master plan of termination of the relationship with Indian tribes, and basically terminating Indian tribes with respect to their government system in the way they had agreed upon. So part of that plan was, it was called the relocation program in 1956. Basically, it was a job, work, vocation type of program. The idea behind it was, okay, we have the majority of American Indian people living on reservations, living in rural areas where there is not much economic opportunity. And they're struggling on a day-to-day basis in terms of the mindset of the dominant society to survive. And so they, in the wisdom, the great wisdom, said, well, if we move to the cities, there's jobs, there's opportunity. The American dream is there. We'll send in, and we're going to help you do that. So Denver was one of those original relocation cities. And for a period of time up until the 70s, Indian people were offered the opportunity and encouraged and given the opportunity to move. In some cases, given stipends, subsistence help in terms of rent money and travel expenses and things like that, to move to Denver, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Salt Lake City, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, some of the major urban areas at the time. And the idea was they would come here, they would find jobs, they would start to raise their families and have productive lives. Sounds good on paper, and the movement then, that 6% in 1950, then jumped automatically almost to 60% right after this happened. This started in 1956. As families and people moved to the cities, when they got here, for example, Denver, I'll use it as an example, they were given probably 4 or 5 pages like this, had listings of job opportunities, maybe some apartments, houses, maybe ideas of real estate agents they could talk to. and pretty much said, okay, here's 4 weeks of assistance. Have fun. And literally that's kind of what happened. I'm kind of paraphrasing it a little bit. But there wasn't a whole lot of help. Within 2 to 3 weeks, you know how difficult it is now to get a job or find housing. A lot of people became frustrated, but they were tribal people for the most part and had a difficult time adjusting. It was culture shock. And we all deal with that. We go someplace we're not familiar with. After a while, we kind of look around for something that's going to give us a little bit more support and encouragement and motivation. So anyway, there were those that stuck it out, and they did well, and they survived. Indian people were survivors, and they toughed it out. I've heard a saying, encouragement, the word of encouragement to Indian people was endeavor to persevere. And I think that applies to all of us, as we hit challenges, we're going to overcome them, and that's what they did. But to help during that time in these relocation cities, social service agencies or organizations sprang up among the Indian people themselves and supporters to help provide them some guidance, provide a place to go, a cultural center. And so that's the Denver Indian Center and kind of the origin of it. So in 1968, there was a group that formed, and I apologize, I don't have the exact title, but I believe they were called United Native Americans of Colorado or something to that effect. But they organized and established an office, and they provided a beacon of hope or a lighthouse for Indian people to come to. And from that, the Denver Indian Center was founded in 1983 and worked with the city. And the city actually gave us some property and a building, an old schoolhouse over on Morrison Road, which we're still there. And from that point on, the Denver Indian Center worked to provide opportunities and provided a safe place for people to go to get information, job opportunities, life skill programs, and just how to deal with everyday life in an urban area. And that's what we still do today. Right now at the Denver Indian Center, we have 2 major programs. One is Native Workforce Development, which we work directly with tribal members to provide them leads to jobs and the training and support services necessary to be successful in those jobs, whatever it might take. It's kind of like case-by-case basis, but it's funded by the Department of Labor. The other program we have in place is the Honoring Fatherhood program. And it is a program that is targeting or focused on working with men, American Indian men, but it is open to anybody that would be interested. That is a parent and or meets certain guideline criteria. But the idea was in Indian culture, tradition, history, family is the foundation of the camp. Family is the foundation of the concept of survival. And everybody in that family, mom, dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, everybody had a role. And over the course of time, through the relocation programs, boarding schools, placement on reservations, all the things that have impacted Indian people as we know, somewhere along the way, American Indian men, where the father role, the male, kind of lost this direction, I guess, best way. Because of everything they were dealing with. They were pulled from what they knew traditionally as a protector and provider of the family to be put in a position that, you come to Denver, you can't hunt buffalo. You can't do some of the things that historically, that I'm kind of simplifying a little bit. But the role was kind of put in a gray area. We're trying to reintroduce that through our program. It's more about life skills, choices you make, but your role as a man, looking from the historical perspective, and particularly around the role of the father. Fatherhood is a little bit different than parenting. It encompasses much other. Now, half our classes are single moms. They're playing the role of the father to a degree. And so that's the interest that we have. But that's the other component, dealing with life situations, circumstances, coming from the standpoint of self-improvement. We also have, tied to our mission statement, is working with our youth. So we have youth programs. Right now it's primarily around physical activities, basketball teams. We have an elders program right now as well, and they basically are those that are attending and participating in our program are those that actually in some cases were part of the relocation program. I mean, they came here as teenagers and now they're still here. They went through a career and some of them are retired, but others, they just want a place to go and socialize, be around others, maybe their same age or in that age category, but also be around other Indian people. That's that social connection. We all have it. We want to be around those that are kind of like us to share, and that's kind of the primary focus of our elders program. One of the activities we have is a monthly luncheon where they come and we have people that come and speak. So at some point we may have a representative from Denver Water come and talk to them and share whatever you do. How clean the water is or whatever's involved with that. I was talking with your colleagues here earlier. I appreciate you have some posters downstairs that have kind of information pieces along the way that kind of give tidbits of history about Indian people. And that's good. And we're still here. So we're still making history. So I kind of gave you a really broad stroke of some of the tribes that lived here in Colorado historically, and some of them that are still here, numbers. And I mentioned that I'm Kiowa, and I've heard stories from some of, I'll call them grandparents, the elders that I've talked to, that shared stories they heard from their grandparents. And many of them start with, at the time we were at the foot of the Rockies. And so the Kiowa people, our origin story came about, and it's been identified as probably up around the Yellowstone area. And so if we originated up in that area from our stories, the anthropologists probably say something different. You came across the Bering Strait. We kind of migrated down through the foot of the Rockies, probably across Denver, and now we're in Oklahoma. So I'm here, so maybe we're kind of moving back here to Colorado. But anyway, that's a little bit of my background, and share with you a little bit about Denver, what's happening here, what our program is here. We're not the only agency that's there to help our community. We have some sister agencies, and two primary agencies are the Denver Health and Family Services Center, which can accommodate clinical needs and behavioral health support. The Denver Indian Family Resource Center is another program or organization that works with primarily the Indian Child Welfare Act, and dealing with custody cases, family issues, and things like that. But we're all partnered together. We're the three primary organizations. There are some others here. The American Indian College Fund is headquartered here in Denver. And if you haven't heard about the American Indian College Fund, it's comparable to the United Negro College Fund, which most everybody has heard of. They provide funding for primarily tribal college students attending tribal colleges around the country. But they also provide scholarships for students attending mainstream schools. But they are headquartered here in Denver. It's a national organization. In fact, a couple of years ago, Reader's Digest, doing one of their surveys, the best of, listed the American Indian College Fund as the best educational nonprofit to send your money to. So we felt very good about that. And you have it right here in your backyard. There are, again, some other major national American Indian organizations are headquartered here. And it all spawned from, again, being that crossroads of Indian country. So I'm going to break right here. And we've got about 6 minutes left or so. Anybody has any questions? Throw them out there.
Can you tell us the times of the powwow on Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Specific
What
times?
I know, and again, when you get older, you get a shorter memory. I think it starts on Friday, and I believe it goes from 10 to 10 on Friday, 10 to 10 on Saturday,
Okay.
and I believe 10 to 6 on Sunday. Sunday's the one I'm not totally
Okay.
positive.
And where is it at?
It's at the Denver Coliseum,
Okay.
105 I-70. And I believe parking's $10, I think, in the major parking areas, similar to the Western show. And I think adults is $7 a day entry. And the one thing, similar to, they have the stock show or the Western show, they've got vendors all around the Coliseum, if you're familiar. And in addition, they have fry bread, but vendors from all different tribes selling and programs, so it's a pretty busy, crowded place.
If I can just add to that, they also have the grand entrance, which is pretty cool to see. It's all the different tribes that are being represented. They all kind of come in and are introduced. And then after that, they do the dancing and drum circle performances. But the grand entrance is really nice to see.
Yeah.
Is that on Friday?
That's at 6. I'm not positive,
Sure.
but I believe it's at 6. And the times I've gone, I lived here, 35 years, and for whatever reason, my professional life, I was always on travel during this weekend. So I've only gone 4 or 5 times, but during the grand entry in recent years, I know they have so many dancers, and they come in by group designation categories. I think it runs a little over an hour.
Yeah, it's at 11 a.m. on Friday.
Okay. And I know they do an evening routine.
Yeah, and then it's at 7 p.m. also on Friday.
Good.
Okay.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just, I had a question. I was interested to know what are some of the ways, or I guess, that you encourage new people to, while coming into, I won't say assimilating, but like just kind of, getting jobs and functioning in society, but still holding on to like who you are. Because I know that probably, I know as me, it can be challenging, to, be a part of society and, be successful, but at the same time, hold your values and things, even when they may not align with the general, values system.
One thing, real basically, this Indian people, Native American people are spiritual people. And I'm not saying religious, from automatically people think Catholic, Baptist, whatever. We're a religious people. That's how we lived our lives. And so you've heard about, you see them sometimes, the medicine wheel or the circle of life. Indian people, the foundation is the circle to a degree. So if you're looking at the medicine wheel, that's life and the 4 categories: emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual. What we try to tell people, tying into what you're saying, is that if you live a balanced lifestyle, you have all of those things, and you get up in the morning. Most of us get up, we're a little bit of chaos, and we got to comb our hair and figure out the day. But once you get going, once you try to establish yourself in terms of all those categories, the spiritual, emotional, the intellectual, all the aspects, then that will prepare you to not only be a good parent, a good partner, a good co-worker, a good neighbor, and all that. So that ties to being who you are as an Indian person. The traditional cultural part, your language, if you know your language or are familiar with your language, the customs, the traditions, the stories. If you understand that who you are, the uniqueness of it, then that's going to go a long way to help you deal with surviving in a society. And you hear it, and again, it's more of an example on the extreme end, but when we would hunt buffalo or we'd hold camp or do whatever, we can't do that now.
Right.
That if we want to live in Denver, we're going to have a place to stay. Probably going to have transportation to get to and from, primarily a job or something that's going to give us money to pay for all these things, school, education, everything that goes along with that. So that's the piece that, we talk with them. That's what you have to look at in terms of surviving here. but again, not giving up who you are. So that's a perfect question, because we talked about that in our sessions and we're working with our participants. The mission of the Denver Indian Center is self-reliance, self-determination, and education. So, to get a job, basically you have to have skills. How do you get those skills? You got to learn. That's a foundation of Indian culture, is knowledge, being teachable. So you got to have motivation, you got to have desire. And so all of those things come from living that balanced lifestyle.
So back in the day, your tribes were, Cherokees stayed with Cherokees and whatever, but as your numbers are dwindling, have you all come together as Native Americans as opposed to distinct tribes, or
Well,
are there still some divides and
oh,
I can't talk to you because you're this, or you can't talk to me?
That's not like America.
that's a whole nother day workshop to talk about it. I mean, there's Indian politics, you've heard of that, but I'll just leave that at that. The best way I can answer that in a short period of time is, okay, think about Europe. You got Germany. To me, they're all white people. Okay?
Yeah.
That's right. How did they distinguish themselves differently? But they do interact. Now, the United States is a country of immigrants. Y'all are
Except for
immigrants.
us.
Yeah.
We're not.
Exactly. So basically, what you're pointing out is, if you have one stick, you can break it pretty easy. You got two, the more you get together, it's strong. And that always comes up. Why don't Indian people unite? We do kind of spiritually, but we all have our own languages, customs. We're very different, like French and Germans. I mean, that's the
so they
distinction.
try to stay in those
And
lanes.
we keep it. But the other things that we have in common, that's where the unification, and personally I think, is still there. Now the numbers are not necessarily dwindling. They are growing. But again, that's why I said we could do another seminar. Who is an Indian? With intermarriage, and probably what started that initially was the boarding schools, where you had different tribes coming in and they met, they became families. And I'm of that generation. My mom is full-blood Kiowa, my dad's full-blood Cherokee, and they met. They both went to boarding schools in Oklahoma, but they met and could both speak their own language. They communicated by spoke signals because they couldn't speak. That's how the kids learn. Work with me, I'm being a little...
That's all the truth.
So what's happening, and it's just intermarriage and combination of tribes. So now the tribes themselves are dealing with this to a degree in identifying who their members are. And as sovereign governments, then it becomes almost a legal political issue. They say, okay, you may have all these other tribal affiliations, but based on blood quantum or whatever, you're going to be recognized as our tribe. So, the idea or concept of pan-Indianism, you've heard that term, is more of a general observation and understanding of Indian people. But there are continued efforts, ongoing efforts, with not only organizations, but just, we are one type of community. How do we come together for purposes of providing opportunities for our constituents, our members, our people? Good question. I mean, those are the type of questions that even Indian people, Native people, are looking at and figuring out right now.
Do you see more of an interest in younger people in Native culture since the climate in this world, not just this country, has changed so much? I mean, do you see a resurgence of people, kids trying to learn about their culture now? Or has that always been something that...
Just like anything else, it ebbs and flows. When you recognize that you're losing something, then somebody steps up to try to make a difference. I know right now in many areas, not only tribes, but in areas like this, Denver, for example, the Denver school system, they do offer several tribal languages. I think Lakota for sure. In other areas, I'm seeing that. So now they're trying to bring back the language or what the language means. And even though it may not be spoken fluently, because to learn a language, you have to hear it all, in my opinion, you have to hear it all the time, be immersed in it. So with that, there are immersion schools, there are areas where they are really learning it, and it's helping them to retain that. But coming back to the focus on youth, I mean, because we have, in Indian communities, you have the same issues you have with general drugs, violence, sexual abuse, all of those things. They don't choose, they don't look and see who you are. Those ills come after you as well. So we're dealing with that. So there is a focus. Just like everybody, children are our future. And that's the importance of our fatherhood program. Whatever we've learned, our experience as a parent growing up, what we've encountered, the choices we make now, we know will impact our kids. So that's the purpose that we have in some of our programs, is strengthening the values and the self-determination, motivation of our children going forward. But again, like you said, not losing who you are, being proud of who you are. And it doesn't always necessarily, wearing the buckskin and wearing the feathers and doing all that. It's in here of who you are. That's why, I thought somebody said, where'd you get that pink shirt? I said, well, I'm tough enough to wear pink.
That's right.
But I have one more question. Okay. So, so what are some things that, us, I guess maybe kind of on the outside looking in, things that supportive, things we can do, look into, or just little things that will maybe help support or encourage, because we're all, here together, and I definitely, it's part of our inclusivity, to make sure that all cultures, everyone is supported. So what are little things, because I know there's always little things you can do or look into and things like that maybe could show that we, are in support of.
Appreciate or recognize.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I'll say number one, respect. Have respect for people. And that doesn't mean, how you define that, but if you know of somebody that's Indian or Native American or whatever term, just recognizing that they bleed red too. They have the same feelings, emotions, and all of that. Just recognize that. Now, the next step is being open to them, accepting, but wanting to learn more about them. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. And if you do it respectfully, and they know that, we want to share. We want to share our culture. We want to share our history. We want to share who we are and where we're going. And we can only keep it if we keep, if we're motivated to do that. Now, the other part, you said, how can we support some of the efforts like the Denver Indian Center, things like that? Two things. Obviously, is your pocketbook. The other is volunteers. And the third is just being more knowledgeable about Indian people. Watch with, like in old movies especially, but new movies and everything, kind of watch with an objective eye, an open mind, realizing that sometimes, Hollywood takes license. And I'll give you an example. Stereotypes, that's what you want to break down, really. I think that's to a degree what you're asking, break down stereotypes. Okay. And this is one that even got tied into Indian culture, because you see it now. You see headbands, beaded headbands with a feather and everything. That wasn't necessarily an Indian trait or tradition. You know how that mostly came about? In the 20s and 30s when they were having movies and they had non-Indians playing Indians with their wigs. They had to have something to hold the wigs on.
Oh, wow.
So then it kind of caught on. Everybody, it kind of looks good.
Very interesting.
Look at old photos. Around 1800s or, when Curtis and others were kind of going around Indian country and taking those pictures you see at the museums. You're not going to see that type of thing.
it's like, when you were young, you played cowboys and Indians, and the cowboys were good, and the Indians were bad. I mean, as an African American, I understand that whole thing, but I'm just saying, that's how we were brought up to think that, and then you don't really know the history of Native people, and then you have to respect that they were here first. That's how I.
And that's why they were fighting,
Absolutely. To save their own families.
Just think that, that in our communities here, hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but you want to defend what's yours. You want to, especially, your livelihood and your families.
Civil War something different.
Yeah.
Civil War something different.
They were fighting to protect their land and their territory.
They were fighting not in slavery.
And, history,
Let me start.
I'm always learning, but history, it's interesting about what history is, and, we believe in circles, what comes around goes around, and if you don't get involved, if you're not knowledgeable, history, especially the negative, will repeat itself. And to a degree, we're dealing with that even today.
And kind of with that said, let me, just do a plug, and I know Corinne already kind of plugged the Inclusivity Committee. That's really what the committee's about. The committee is about, we all believe the same. I love, my favorite song right now is Mandisa. She sings a song called We All Believe the Same. Because we have a lot more in common than not in common. And really kind of the role of what our committee tries to do is to really educate the employees on different cultures, because you realize, wow, they just call it something different, but they do the same thing. They value family just like I value family. They value this just like I value this. And we tend to think we have a lot more different between each other than the same. And if we really value that we have a lot more in common than we have different, then we'll start breaking down those barriers. And that's really what we're trying to do with the committee, and just educate, just like you said. Know the history, get educated. The more you know, the less you're gonna be so afraid to walk up to somebody and have a good conversation with them to learn something about them.
We're fearful of things we don't know.
Absolutely.
And that's where racism, stereotypes,
Yep.
all that comes about.
Yeah.
So, check our Facebook, Denver Indian Center. We are starting to, one of the efforts in my role there is to get more involved with our entire community. So I'm out talking with more organizations because we're all kind of looking to do the same thing, to help people. And we have events, activities. We have fry bread. We call it Fry Bread Friday. And so we're starting to have that. People are coming there. It's an opportunity not only to eat some fry bread, which is not necessarily a cultural food, but it's tied to us and we like it. But it gives an opportunity to ask questions and see what we're actually doing and where we're at.
And then at noon today, come down to the cafeteria area. We're going to have dancers and drummers. And I want to thank Tara, too. for all your help.
Yeah, Tara.
Important. And the cafeteria is serving the fried bread tacos today, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For coming.
All right.